It doesn't start with a fight. It starts with silence. No words, no closure, just a quiet stop. So sudden it almost feels unreal. Two people who used to orbit each other suddenly drift into separate worlds. The messages fade. The calls die. And what looks like the end is only the beginning of something neither of you understands yet, because silence isn't empty. It's the most dangerous space in any relationship. The invisible field where control, fear, and ego quietly change sides. For the dismissive avoidant, silence is armor. Pulling back means safety, power, control. For you, it was always pursuit. Filling the gaps, holding the bridge, keeping the connection alive even when it was dying in their hands. But now, both sides have stopped. No contact, no movement, only stillness. And yet, that stillness is not peace. It's pressure. Something beneath the surface begins to shift. The ego that once felt safe in distance starts to tremble, and the part of you that once feared silence begins to find power inside it. This is the moment where the story quietly flips, where the hunter becomes the mirror, and the silence starts to speak back. Because the real change never happens in the noise. It happens here, in the calm that terrifies both of you. So stay until the end, and you'll understand why this quiet phase is where obsession begins. If this message already resonates with you, like this video, subscribe to Stoic Silence, and start this journey now. Drop a 1 if you've ever used silence to regain your power, or a 2 if you're learning to. I read every comment because your story sharpens this brotherhood. And stay, because what happens next is the moment the silence stops protecting them and starts haunting them. 1. The beginning of silence. It never starts with a storm. It starts with silence. No fights, no final words, just a quiet separation that feels unnatural, like a breath held too long. Two people who once shared every corner of their world now move through separate orbits, pretending that peace has taken its place. But it isn't peace, it's a void that hums with everything left unsaid. I told myself I was fine, that this silence was maturity, that walking away without words was strength. I said I'd found control. But real peace doesn't weigh this much. Real peace doesn't echo through every hour of the day, reminding you of what used to fill the space. It's strange how silence can sound louder than noise when you're not ready to face yourself. The hardest part isn't the absence of their voice. It's the presence of your thoughts. Every moment without contact becomes a mirror, forcing you to confront the truth you've been avoiding. How much of your identity was tied to being heard, to being seen, to being wanted. You start to realize that what you miss isn't the person. It's the certainty that you mattered to someone. That illusion is what silence comes to break. At first, it feels cruel, like a punishment from the universe. But with every passing day, that quiet starts to reveal something deeper. You begin to notice that silence doesn't come to destroy you. It comes to strip away the noise that kept you from hearing your own voice. It comes to show you what's real when all the distractions are gone. That's when the shift begins. You stop waiting for the next message and start listening to what the stillness is trying to tell you. It's uncomfortable, yes, but it's also the beginning of awareness. Because silence isn't here to comfort you. It's here to expose you, to rebuild you, to teach you what strength sounds like when there's nothing left to say. And that's where the story truly begins, not when they leave, but when you finally decide to stop chasing the noise and start facing yourself. Because that's when silence transforms from emptiness into evolution. 2. The discomfort of stillness. The first nights are always the hardest. You tell yourself you're fine, that this is what you wanted, distance, clarity, control. But as the hours stretch and the silence deepens, every small sound starts to echo louder. The phone on the table feels heavier than ever, like a symbol of everything you're trying not to reach for. You scroll through distractions, open and close apps, talk to friends who mean well, but nothing fills the gap. Because this isn't about boredom, it's about withdrawal. You're not detoxing from a person. You're detoxing from the emotional rhythm that defined your days. You think you miss them, but what you really miss is certainty. The predictable pattern of good mornings, the validation in every reply, the comfort of being needed. That rhythm gave you a sense of safety, not because it was love, but because it was familiar. And when it's gone, the stillness feels personal, like a mirror held too close to your face. You begin to see how much of your peace was outsourced, how dependent your calm was on someone else's response. That's the first revelation silence gives you. It exposes the illusion of control. You weren't in control of connection. You were addicted to routine. You were mistaking activity for intimacy, noise for meaning, attention for affection, and realizing that truth cuts deep because it forces you to admit something uncomfortable, that sometimes what we call love is just the fear of being alone dressed in softer words. But this discomfort isn't punishment, it's purification. It's the emotional detox that clears away the noise so you can finally hear your own heartbeat again. Stillness has a way of showing you what your soul truly needs once the craving for validation fades. So you sit with it. You let the silence sting, because the sting is where growth begins. You stop checking the phone for reassurance and start checking yourself for answers. The restlessness doesn't disappear overnight, but each moment you resist the urge to escape it, you reclaim a piece of power you didn't know you'd lost. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, the discomfort of stillness becomes the foundation of strength. The same silence that once haunted you becomes the ground where emotional discipline is born. What used to feel empty now begins to feel honest. And that honesty, though it hurts, is the beginning of peace. 3. The power she thinks she has. In her mind, silence means she's won. No contact, no emotion, no vulnerability. She convinces herself that distance equals power, that by saying nothing she's controlling the narrative. It's a quiet victory she celebrates in private, one built on the illusion that detachment is strength. She calls it peace, but it's really avoidance wearing the mask of confidence. She tells herself she's fine, that she's unbothered, collected, untouchable. Maybe she even believes it, for a while. Because the absence of noise can trick the mind into thinking it's calm. She scrolls through her phone, sees the empty messages, and tells herself it's proof of control. He'll break first, she thinks. He always does. That's the story her ego needs to keep the illusion alive. But time, as it always does, starts revealing the truth. Because silence doesn't freeze emotion, it amplifies it. It gives the mind space to wander, to replay, to question. What began as control slowly becomes curiosity, then discomfort. The quiet that once felt like armor starts to feel like isolation. And in that isolation, something shifts. The power she thought she owned begins to tremble beneath her feet. True strength isn't found in withdrawal, it's found in awareness. Pulling back to protect yourself is easy, but staying distant from everything that might wake your heart, that's not power. That's fear dressed as strategy. And fear always cracks under the weight of time. I used to think she was unshakable, that her silence meant certainty. But now I see it for what it is, a fragile performance of control. Because real power doesn't need to prove itself through distance. Real power is calm, not cold. It's stillness with understanding, not avoidance with pride. Sooner or later, the quiet stops working. The silence that once protected her begins to echo back everything she tried not to feel. That's what time does. It strips away illusion. It takes the very wall you built to hide behind and turns it into a mirror. And when that mirror reflects back the emptiness behind the mask, the truth finally surfaces. What she called control was never control at all. It was fear of losing what she didn't know how to keep. And that's when the silence stops serving her and starts exposing her. 4. The cracks in control. At first, she wears her silence like a crown. It's her proof that she's in control, her badge of emotional discipline. She tells herself she's fine, that she doesn't need to reach out, doesn't need to explain, doesn't need to care. But silence has a strange way of testing what's real. The longer it lingers, the heavier it becomes. What once felt like power starts to feel like waiting. What once felt like control starts to feel like uncertainty. It begins quietly, a thought, a flicker of doubt. Why hasn't he called? Did he move on? Was he really that calm? Or is he just done? She doesn't say it out loud. She won't let it show. But deep down, the questions start to hum beneath her calm exterior. Her stillness isn't confidence anymore. It's curiosity disguised as composure. Every day without a message feels less like control and more like losing ground. And that's how power shifts, not through confrontation, but through time. The silence she thought she controlled begins to work against her. The very distance that made her feel safe now starts to echo back the truth. She doesn't know where she stands anymore. What she called indifference was just a strategy built on assumption. The assumption that I'd always return. But when I didn't, her silence stopped being a statement and became a question. Meanwhile, something inside me begins to shift too. For the first time, I'm not reacting. I'm not chasing, not explaining, not trying to prove my worth through noise. The stillness that once terrified me now feels like balance. While she's beginning to question, I'm beginning to see. I see how much of our connection was built on reaction, how much power I handed away each time I tried to fix the distance she created. The cracks in her control mirror the repair in mine. Every moment she spends wondering is a moment I spend reclaiming. Every unanswered thought she hides behind calmness is matched by my growing clarity. The silence that once worked in her favor has turned into a quiet equalizer, a test of who can stay still without losing themselves. And that's the hidden truth about silence. It doesn't just reveal who breaks first, it reveals who grows first. The longer the quiet lasts, the clearer everything becomes. What feels like her victory now is only the beginning of her unraveling and my awakening. 5. The war within. The real battle never happens between two people. It happens inside your own mind. Silence isn't a tactic. It's a test. The test of how well you can sit with yourself when every instinct screams for relief. The urge to reach out, to explain, to check her profile, to send a harmless, "Hey," it doesn't come from love. It comes from fear wearing the mask of care, fear of being forgotten, fear of being replaced, fear that your silence doesn't matter. Every time I felt that impulse rising, I could almost hear the war begin. Logic and emotion fighting for control. The mind wants order. The heart wants comfort. One side whispers, "Just text her. It'll make you feel better." The other side replies, "No, not this time." The space between those two voices is where discipline is born. The first few nights, I lost that battle more in my head than in action. I'd imagine the conversation, rehearse the message, justify why reaching out would be mature. But each time I held the line, something subtle shifted inside me. I realized the victory wasn't in her response, it was in my restraint. I wasn't trying to control her anymore, I was learning to control me. That's when I understood what Stoicism truly meant. It isn't about suppressing emotion, it's about mastering reaction. Feelings still come, the ache, the doubt, the nostalgia, but they no longer dictate your next move. You let them rise, observe them, and let them fall without chasing after them. That's the essence of peace, not the absence of emotion, but the presence of control. The more I practiced silence, the more I started to hear something I'd never noticed before, my own clarity. Every time I resisted the urge to break the quiet, I discovered strength that used to be buried under impulsiveness. What once felt like loneliness now started to feel like liberation. The need for validation slowly turned into self-trust. It's not an easy war to win. Your mind will tempt you with what-ifs. It will replay memories like old films, waiting for you to flinch. But if you can hold your stillness long enough, something changes. The noise fades. The craving softens. You stop reaching outward and start reaching inward. That's the moment silence stops feeling like punishment and starts becoming power. Each breath taken without reaction becomes an act of mastery. Each pause becomes proof that you've grown beyond the need to chase peace from others. And when you reach that point, when your silence is no longer a weapon or a defense, but a form of discipline, that's when you realize the war within was never about her. It was about reclaiming yourself. 6. The mirror turns on her. Silence has no favorites. It's the most honest judge there is. It doesn't take sides. It simply reflects what's real beneath the surface. For a while she believed she was safe behind her silence, that by holding back she was untouchable. But silence, like time, always changes shape. What once felt like control slowly starts to feel like weight. What once gave her peace now starts to echo back questions she can't silence. At first it's subtle. She scrolls without meaning to. She lingers on my name, hovers over old messages, watches a story from an account she swore she'd never open again. Then come the breadcrumbs, a like on a post, a comment left at the edge of plausibility, a memory shared just vague enough to be noticed but never addressed. It's not connection. It's curiosity wearing the mask of indifference. Her silence was supposed to prove she didn't care, but now it's the very thing reminding her that she still does. I used to mistake those signs for hope, for proof that something still existed between us. But now I see them differently. They're not bridges, they're echoes. Echoes of someone trying to convince themselves they're still in control, while quietly feeling the walls of that illusion close in. Because that's what silence does when it's built on fear. It turns the wall you hide behind into a mirror you can't escape. She thought distance would protect her, that not reaching out meant power. But silence, when held for the wrong reasons, becomes heavy. It begins to whisper truths you can't unhear. If he's not reaching out, does that mean he's done? Was I wrong about how much he cared? Did I misjudge the balance? These aren't words she'll say out loud, but they live in her quiet moments, in the spaces between distraction and denial. And while she's checking my stories, I'm no longer checking hers. While she's replaying old memories, I'm writing new ones. The roles have reversed without a word being spoken. That's the hidden beauty of silence. It doesn't demand action, it exposes reaction. It shows who's truly at peace and who's just pretending to be. In the end, the silence she built as a fortress has become a mirror reflecting her own uncertainty. The same stillness she once used to keep me guessing is now the space where she starts to question herself. That's the quiet shift she never saw coming, when the mirror turns on her and the silence she controlled starts to control her instead. 7. The turning point. There's a day when everything quietly shifts. It doesn't come with an announcement or a message from her. It happens in silence. The same silence that once felt like a punishment. Only now it feels different. Something in me stops waiting. The weight I'd been carrying, The expectation, the longing, the constant mental noise starts to dissolve. It's not that I stop caring, it's that I stop clinging. For the first time, I wake up without reaching for my phone. The mornings feel lighter, the air feels different. The silence that used to scream at me now sounds like peace. It's not because she changed, it's because I did. I'm no longer measuring my worth through someone else's attention. I'm not chasing closure or clarity or control. I'm simply being. It's strange how the same quiet that once broke you can start to build you. In the early days, silence felt like absence. Now it feels like presence. Mine. I start to sleep better. My thoughts untangle. The fog that used to cloud everything begins to lift. I realize that freedom doesn't arrive when they come back. It arrives when you no longer need them to. That's the moment I understood the true meaning of detachment. It's not indifference. It's not a wall. It's balance. It's the quiet confidence of knowing that your peace no longer depends on the unpredictable rhythm of someone else's emotions. What once felt like losing control now feels like regaining it. I'm not reacting anymore. I'm observing. I can see everything more clearly without the distortion of hope or hurt. She might still be there, testing the silence, scrolling, wondering. But I no longer orbit around her energy. I'm centered in mine. And the more I stay grounded, the more I notice how powerful stillness can be. It doesn't beg. It doesn't chase. It doesn't prove. It just is. And in that state of just being, something incredible happens. Peace takes root. Not the fragile kind that depends on things going right, but the deep kind that survives even when nothing goes your way. The turning point isn't when she returns, it's when you stop needing her to. It's when you stop using her silence as a mirror for your worth and start seeing it as a reflection of your progress. Because once you stop waiting for someone to validate your existence, you realize you were never missing them. You were missing yourself. And that realization changes everything. The same quiet that once haunted you becomes your foundation. The same stillness that once felt unbearable becomes the space where your mind finally breathes. That's when the silence stops being about her and becomes about you, your growth, your discipline, your peace. And that peace, that's the one thing she can never touch. 8. The power shift. When two people stop contacting each other, something invisible begins to move beneath the surface. It's not dramatic. There are no fights, no final words, no grand closure, just silence. And in that silence, the balance quietly changes. The one who once depended on response starts to lose power, while the one who learns to stay still begins to gain it. At first, it doesn't look like anything is happening. She still carries the same calm, still tells herself she's in control. But control built on being chased is fragile. The moment the chase ends, the illusion starts to break. She can feel it, the energy shifting, the emotional gravity fading. What used to pull her towards certainty now drifts away, replaced by an unease she can't name. It's not about missing me. It's about missing the validation that my presence once gave her. Meanwhile, something inside me starts to rebuild. Every hour I don't check the phone, every day I don't react, every moment I choose silence over impulse, it all becomes an investment. Not in revenge, not in pride, but in myself. I start to realize that real strength doesn't come from winning someone back. It comes from not needing to anymore. The game doesn't flip with anger. It flips with evolution. When you no longer move from emotion, but from awareness, you change the entire dynamic. You stop feeding the loop that kept you trapped, and in that stillness, you rise. She begins to sense it too, not through words, but through absence. The silence that once served her now starts to serve me. What used to be my waiting becomes her wondering, and as the days pass, She feels what I once felt, the weight of uncertainty, the echo of what's gone. That's how power shifts, quietly, invisibly, without confrontation. The one who controls themselves controls the story. And in that realization, you understand something profound. Evolution is the ultimate revenge. Because while she's still wondering what happened, you're already becoming someone she can no longer reach. 9. The testing phase. She doesn't call. She tests, not with words, but with subtle moves that speak louder than a message ever could. A like on an old post. A view on a story she shouldn't still be watching. A random meme dropped into the void, casual on the surface but heavy with intent. She's not reaching out to reconnect. She's checking for signs of life, trying to see if the door is still open. In the past, I would have taken the bait. I would have mistaken these crumbs for connection, convinced myself that a single reaction meant progress. That's what emotional conditioning does. It makes you search for meaning in mixed signals, hoping for closure from someone who never gave clarity in the first place. But I don't play that game anymore. I've learned that silence isn't just about not speaking. It's about not reacting. Now I see those little gestures for what they are. Control disguised as curiosity. They're not about me. They're about her need to know she still holds space in my mind. But she doesn't. Not anymore. Every time I don't respond, I reinforce the new balance. Not out of pride, but out of clarity. Because attention is energy, and I've learned to spend mine wisely. She wants reassurance that her absence still affects me. But what she doesn't understand is that silence, true silence, becomes stronger the longer it's maintained. Each time I resist the urge to respond, I reclaim the power of absence. I stop letting external noise dictate my internal state, and that's not coldness, that's discipline. That's what Stoicism looks like when it's lived, not preached. The old me would have rushed to decode every signal, every small test. The new me simply observes. I let her gestures drift by like passing clouds, noticed but not chased. Because the truth is, not everything that demands your attention deserves your response. Some things only exist to test your control, and when you refuse to react, the test ends, and you win without ever playing. That's the discipline of stillness, mastering the milliseconds between impulse and action. It's not about proving a point to her. It's about proving strength to yourself. And with every unreturned breadcrumb, every ignored signal, I'm not losing connection, I'm gaining peace. That's what real power feels like. Quiet, steady, untouchable. 10. The transformation. There comes a moment when silence changes its meaning. What once felt unbearable, heavy with longing and confusion, begins to feel grounding, like the earth beneath your feet finally stopped shifting. It's subtle at first. You don't wake up one morning completely healed, but you notice the difference. Your thoughts aren't circling around someone else anymore. Your peace no longer depends on the next notification. I began to see how much of my life had revolved around someone else's approval. Every small gesture, every reply, every glance was a silent measurement of my worth. That's the quiet trap of attachment. It convinces you that love equals validation. But when the noise fades and you're left alone with yourself, you start to realize how much of that noise came from fear, not connection. The silence that used to break me now builds me. I start to find meaning in ordinary things again, the rhythm of my morning routine, the calm of solitude, the comfort of doing something without needing it to be seen. I used to think peace would come when she returned, but peace came when I stopped waiting for her to. That's when the shift becomes undeniable. I'm no longer running from the silence, I'm walking with it. It's no longer something I have to survive, it's something I've grown into. Each day without reaction becomes another layer of strength. Each quiet night becomes proof that I no longer need chaos to feel alive. And somewhere in that stillness, I start to feel something new. Gratitude. Because without the silence, I never would have met this version of myself. Calm, grounded, self-assured. The man who no longer needs to be seen to know his worth. That's when you know the silence has done its work, when it stops hurting and starts healing. When the absence that once felt like loss becomes the very space where you find yourself again, because silence doesn't come to punish you, it comes to purify you. And once it's done, you'll realize the quiet never took anything from you. It only returned you to yourself. 11. The consequences for her. On her side, the silence begins to change its shape. What she once proudly called space now feels like isolation. The distance she built as protection starts pressing against her from within, turning her fortress of control into a quiet cage. The air that once felt freeing now feels empty, echoing back questions she tried to bury. She starts to wonder if I've changed, if I've detached, if I've finally let go. She scrolls, lingers, hesitates. The certainty that once gave her comfort begins to crumble under the weight of the unknown. Because silence, when it's real, carries an energy you can feel, calm, steady, detached. It doesn't beg, doesn't prove, doesn't chase. It simply reflects. And that's what begins to haunt her. The reflection. The silence that used to mean control now mirrors the truth she didn't want to see. I'm no longer waiting. The pull she relied on has disappeared, replaced by stillness that doesn't revolve around her anymore. Deep down, she knows the answer to every question she avoids asking. Because silence doesn't lie, it doesn't perform. It simply shows reality for what it is. And in that reflection, she finally realizes that what she lost wasn't me. It was the power she once held over a man who has learned to live in peace without her. 12. The final flip. By the time she realizes what's gone, I'm no longer the man she remembers. The silence that once confused me has become my compass. The distance that once felt unbearable has turned into freedom. The game didn't end because I won. It ended because I stopped playing. And in that decision, everything changed. She looks back, expecting to find the same version of me waiting, the man who used to explain, overextend, and reach for understanding. But that man no longer exists. The silence that once broke me rebuilt me. What she thought was control was only temporary. What I found in the quiet was permanent. Peace. Silence isn't revenge, it's revelation. It doesn't lash out or demand recognition. It doesn't need validation to be powerful. It simply is. It strips away illusions, the noise, the need, the narrative, until all that's left is truth. And that truth is simple. The one who can remain still without needing to be seen has already won something far greater than attention, mastery over self. I learned that you don't need to prove your worth to someone who couldn't recognize it. You don't need closure from the person who caused the confusion. You don't even need the final word, because the silence you hold becomes the proof. It shows who evolved, who stayed, and who fell behind. It's not coldness, it's clarity. It's not detachment, it's freedom. And as she stands there, realizing that the man she once knew is now a stranger to her story, I remain calm. Not because I've forgotten, but because I've outgrown the need to be understood. The silence that once haunted me now protects me. It shields my peace, guards my energy, and reminds me that power isn't in reaction. It's in restraint. Men, silence isn't punishment. It's the process of becoming. Most break when the noise stops, not realizing that silence is where transformation begins. This journey isn't about her. It's about you learning that peace isn't found in being wanted, but in mastering yourself. Every moment of stillness strips away illusion. What once felt like rejection becomes redirection. You stop chasing her approval and start reclaiming your power. That's the essence of Stoicism: strength through restraint, clarity through calm. Remember this: silence doesn't destroy a man, it rebuilds him. The moment you stop reacting, you rise. You stop seeking closure and become it. If this message spoke to you, if you've ever felt the storm and chose silence over chaos, subscribe to Stoic Silence, because here we don't chase validation. We build peace. We don't demand closure. We become it. And when the noise fades and the world keeps talking, remember this: the man who stays still doesn't just win the game, he rises above it.